welcome. So we are recording now.
Okay. So we're at 7 o'clock. So I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone to our council meeting this evening. And our first item of agenda, first item on the agenda, of course, is to adopt the agenda. So I have a motion here moved by Dan, seconded by Lisa, that the agenda for the October 26, 2020 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. I have none to disclose this evening. Lisa?
No, I do not.
Sherry? Dan?
No.
And Steve?
No.
Okay. So next on our agenda is presentations. So we've had a request to reverse the order of the presentation. So unless someone has strong objections, we'll start with the number 2 presentation. That's Derek Ali from and John Murphy with regard to the water and wastewater rate study. So we have, do we have those gentlemen with us?
So one of the gentlemen can't attend. I have someone showing as user.
Oh, that would be me, John Murphy.
Okay, I will.
I didn't realize I had to type my name in.
Okay, Don, I'll promote you to panelist. And he'll be back in just a moment.
Okay.
Right. Now I see everyone.
I'm just going to put your name in here, John. Oops. Okay. So I'm going to start sharing the screen. Oh, looks like he's gone.
That was a very brief presentation.
That was. We'll just wait for him to call back in. There he is. Sorry. Okay. Allowed to talk. More. Promote to panelists. There you go, John. You're on mute. Sorry about that.
Unmute. There we are.
There you go.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you very much for having me. I'm John Murphy, DFA Infrastructure. Myself and Derek Ali have been retained to look at the township's sewer and water rates. I guess the last time this exercise was undertaken was 2015. Since that time, a few things have happened. Your development charges study was completed in 2018, and that feeds into this exercise. What we've done is, in regards to this exercise, we have looked at the full cost of your water and wastewater system and looked at the amounts that need to be recovered annually from users to ensure that the water and wastewater systems are sustainable over the long term. Another aspect of our engagement is to prepare a water and wastewater financial plan that will be submitted to the province as part of your drinking water license renewal application. Next slide. I don't know if we've got it up, sorry. Okay, we're going to go down 2 slides to the agenda. Okay, so what we'll be talking about tonight is our approach in this exercise. We'll look at the full costs of the water and wastewater systems. We'll present the projected rates. We'll quickly discuss the financial plans for your water and wastewater systems, and we'll talk about our recommendations. Next slide. And we'll go down to the next slide. Okay, so we'll go down. There we go. We looked at your costs over a 21-year period to 2041. And what it does, it gives us a long-term perspective of your water and wastewater systems in regards to your anticipated growth and the costs required to service that growth, as well as your operating needs. We looked at your operating maintenance expenses or costs, any long-term debt and the repayment of that debt. We looked at the needed contributions towards your asset replacement. Next slide. We also looked at non-rate revenues to offset the costs we recover from users. That's pretty much your miscellaneous fees and charges, your shared system transfers, and your connection fees, etc. We looked at those costs, the net costs to recover from users over for each year. We also looked at your capital replacement requirements. We looked at your tangible capital asset registry, which identifies all your assets employed in the delivery of water and wastewater. And we looked at the cost to replace those assets and the year in which those assets would be replaced based on the information contained in that information. It's sort of a desktop approach at looking at asset management, given the fact that there currently isn't an asset management plan in the township, for the township. Next slide. So we also looked at your growth capital as per your development charge background study. We looked at the customer and consumption growth based on your current number of customers, their current consumption patterns. And as you know, consumption is only tracked for non-residential customers. Next slide. We didn't change the current rate structure in this engagement. We kept the current structure, which is a fixed or a base charge for residential users and a base and volumetric charge for the non-residential users. In regards to the surpluses generated each year, those surpluses are transferred into your respective water and wastewater reserves, which are used for a number of purposes or available to address a number of purposes that may arise. Now we are recommending that the municipality look at a reserve target balance of between 5 and 10% of the township's replacement costs of their infrastructure for water and wastewater. Next slide. Now here are some of the purposes or reasons for the recommended reserve balances. One obviously is for asset replacement. That's how the municipality currently funds capital infrastructure for water and wastewater. Also, reserve balances are needed for any unforeseen capital needs, which do arise from time to time. It's also used to stabilize rates in years where you may not have the level of consumption as projected. Also, there's a new regulation, 588-17, which addresses asset management policies. Next slide. And what this really deals with is certain contingencies that a municipality may face in regards to climate change. So it addresses vulnerability, climate change, disaster planning, contingency funding. So what it is, it's the province saying to municipalities that you need to ensure that you address these potential issues that may be faced by the municipality. And by having these target balances, it pretty much says that you will have funds available in case there are any challenges, financial challenges as a result of climate change. Next slide. So, next slide. So as I said, we looked at the costs of water and wastewater over a long-term period. We also looked at the life cycle needs beyond the 21-year period to give a long-term perspective of our analysis. Next slide. Next, okay. So again, we looked at we projected out the operating maintenance costs of the systems We looked at the repayment of debt, the principal and interest. We also looked at necessary capital contributions towards your capital replacement. Also looked at projecting out non-rate revenues to get a net cost be recovered from users on an annual basis. Next slide. So this gives sort of a perspective on the cost of the delivery of water over a long-term period. It's averaging out the cost of the 21-year period. And as you can see, the majority of costs are in relation to your contributions or to contributions to the reserve, which is used to fund your infrastructure. So again, you have your operating costs, which are operating maintenance and debt servicing, but then you have your capital program, which what we've determined is will be funded from the reserves, which gets funded from the user rates. So you can see the majority of the revenue generated is to pay for capital infrastructure. Now there are no debt payments. Now, as you can see, there's the footnote, it's net. So the municipality will be looking to issue debt, but that debt will be to fund growth-related infrastructure, which will be paid for from development charges. So there will be no impact on the current users or the users of the system. Growth pays for growth. Next slide. Now, the same can be said for the wastewater system. However, there is a modest debt repayment. And I think that has to do with debt that I believe has just been issued, or FCM, a debenture for the wastewater treatment plant. But again, the majority of the cost is to pay for future capital needs. Next slide. Now, this is a slide that sort of gives you an idea of the current value of your infrastructure. Water assets, the replacement is about 35 million. Wastewater, it's almost 39 million. Now for water, approximately 9 million would be looked to be replaced over that forecast period, with 26 million beyond the 21-year period. Again, it's just to give you an idea based on the our life cycle needs analysis of your tangible capital asset information. Now, on an annual basis, on average, you're looking at a replacement of approximately 1.4 million for water and 1.5 million for wastewater. Next slide. Now, again, we also looked at projecting out customers and consumption. We looked at the current customer count and consumption patterns, and laid on top of that the anticipated growth or new growth based on the development charge background study. So again, we projected out customer growth and consumption growth, which is necessary in calculating or projecting rates for into the future. Next slide. So currently there are about 3,400 customers, of which 3,000 are residential and 400 are non-residential. As you can see, there's only consumption for the non-residential customers. And you can see there's a difference between the water customers and wastewater customers, because there are some customers that do not have wastewater services, although that number is small. Next slide. And here we show the projected number of customers for water and wastewater each 5 years. So we try to sort of spread it out. We couldn't fit each year on the table. But as you can see, there is projected growth anticipated in the township over the next 21 years. Next slide. And this is the corresponding projection of consumption for the non-residential customers over the 21-year period. Next slide. So here are the current rates and the proposed 2021 rates. Now, these rates are based on the previous study, which I believe recommended a 2% increase in 2021. Next slide. So we are recommending increases from 2022 of about 1.5% each year. This will fund or adequately fund the asset replacement needs as I identified earlier. Now we also recommend that this be done in 2025. So in essence, every 5 years, this exercise, the water rates, sewer water rates be updated. Next slide. So here are the projected rates for water and wastewater over the next 6 years from 2021 to 2026. And again, 2021 would be looking at a 2% increase over the 2020 rates. And then from there on, it's a 1.5% increase each year. Next slide. So here are some municipal comparatives. As you can see, the township's water rates, and this is based on a typical residential customers. Now in the township, it's just a flat fee. And you can see how the residential water rates are at, in essence, the median. So they would be considered affordable when compared to the municipal comparators that are listed here. That being said, wastewater for a residential customer would be above the average, would be considered higher than the list of comparable municipalities. So we didn't add them together, but probably for a residential customer, you're probably average or in the middle. Next slide. So here is, we'll be discussing the financial plans for water and wastewater as required under the drinking water license renewal. So Ontario Regulation 18807 requires municipalities to apply, or in this case, renew your drinking water license as part of the drinking water quality management system. Your license expires May 18th, 2021. An application is required to be submitted 6 months prior to that. So November 18th is the renewal date. Well, the application needs to be submitted by November 18th. Now, one of the requirements of that renewal application is the preparation and submission of a financial plan, and that's the Ontario Regulation 45307. Now, this financial plan that we'll present is based on the draft rate study. Next slide. So as I said, it's part of the drinking water license renewal application. One requirement is that council receive or adopt by way of resolution the financial plan. Now, we prepared a wastewater financial plan, which is not a requirement of the application, but is considered best practice. So in essence, the financial plans really are pro forma financial statements. So you'll have a statement of financial position, a statement of cash flow, and a statement of operations. So what it pretty much did is take the cash-based exercise of the rate study and convert it into accrual-based accrual-based documents, which are the financial statements stated here. Next slide. So again, with regards to the financial plan, it is required for a 6-year period. The first year being the year of renewal, which is 2021. So it goes, the financial plan will show the transactions and events from 2021 to 2026. Again, it's based on the draft rate study. We looked at cost, revenues, cash transactions, and your tangible capital assets. Next slide. Okay, so key considerations in regards to preparation of the financial plan, your operating costs and revenue projections, your capital needs projections, your debt projections, reserve projections, and projection of your tangible capital asset acquisitions. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So this is the water financial plan, and these are the operating costs and net costs we recovered from users. As you can see, you're looking at around a 3%, a little over 3% increase each year over the 6-year period. Next slide. Now this is your capital needs projection, which shows the amounts that would be invested in infrastructure, new and replacement. So growth capital, again, is based on your development charge background study, and your non-growth capital is your replacement needs based on your capital projections, and our life cycle needs analysis based on your tangible capital asset registry. Next slide. So this is the water debt projection. Now, as you can see, there will be increasing levels of long-term debt, but that debt is required to fund your growth capital program. Debt servicing, that's identified here. Well, this is principal repayment, but the debt servicing will be paid for from future development charge proceeds. So any repayment of long-term debt will not impact on the user rates. Again, growth pays for growth. And this, again, this is based on the development charge background study. Next slide. So here are your reserve projections. The first is your water reserve. As you can see, it's quite healthy, but you've got transfers from operating. So these are the contributions from the ratepayers. The transfer to capital is the funding of your capital replacement program. You can see how the reserve balance slowly creeps up from 4.6 to 5.6. And this is in keeping with the 5 and 10% target balances. Now with regards to the water development charge reserve, as you can see, there are no transfers to capital. The growth capital program is funded 100% by way of growth long-term debt, which, as you can see, the one line transfer to operating, that is transfers from the development charge reserve fund to service the growth capital debt that's required to be issued to pay for the growth capital program. So any costs related to servicing anticipated growth, as reflected in the background study, is sort of self-contained. The development charges that are calculated and charged on new growth will go into that reserve and will be used to pay for the debt repayment of the debt that was issued to pay for the growth capital program that allows for growth to occur. Next slide. So here are the water, in essence, this is your tangible capital asset registry for our continuity schedule for water assets. As you can see, this is based on your historical cost, not any replacement. And you can see you've got $26 million in historical costs. The accumulated amortization is about 9.5 million. Your annual amortization expense is 400,000. You've got accumulated amortization of 8.8. So your net book value, which is your undepreciated value of your infrastructure, is approximately 17.9 million. And we'll get into that discussion of what that means in the next couple slides. Next slide. So here is the one financial statement that's required to be submitted to the province as part of your water financial plan, your statement of operations, which shows your revenues and expenses. Now these are expenses, not expenditures. One difference is amortization, which is a non-cash expense. You don't budget for expense or amortization. you budget for the transfer to the reserve. Now, the amortization really is the consumption of your infrastructure, and that has to be expensed annually based on a number of factors: the historical cost of the asset, the useful life of the asset. And what you have is a surplus or deficit each year. And in this case, there's surpluses being generated. Now, those surpluses are necessary to pay for non-cash expenses like principal repayment, which is not an expense, but when you do the rate study, the rates are set to be able to pay for not just the interest on debt, but also the repayment of the principal. So that's an expenditure that you would budget for and provide for in your rate exercise, but is not an expense for purposes of the financial statement. It's not an accrual-based expense. Next slide. So here's your statement of cash flows. This shows the sources and uses of cash for the water system. And it starts off with your surplus or deficit and adds back or subtracts non-cash items. So a good example is amortization. That's being added back to the surplus to show cash generated from operations. Then we look at capital activities. Now, what you have there is cash going out to fund the acquisition of assets, capital assets. Then you have your financing activities. Now, one thing is development charges that are collected is not considered a revenue, but it's a cash inflow from future growth. Also, the proceeds of long-term debt is a cash inflow as a result of financing. And then, of course, the repayment of the long-term debt is a cash outflow in regards to the financing. When you add and subtract all those values, you get an increase or decrease in your cash balance. And what we see here is that the municipality has a good cash balance throughout the 6-year period. Next slide. So here is the water statement of financial position, which this shows your financial assets and liabilities. And you are either in a net financial asset position or net debt position. And as you can see, the municipality goes from a net financial asset to net debt position over the 6-year period. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that your liabilities exceed your financial assets. Now, again, those liabilities are paid for over a long term. The largest portion is long-term debt. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to be in a net debt position. It just means that future revenues need to be generated to offset that deficit. The next now you have looked at the non-financial assets, which really are your historical cost of your infrastructure, less your accumulated amortization to get your total non-financial assets. So when that amount is added to your financial assets and net debt, it shows your accumulated surplus. And as you can see, the accumulated surplus increases from 22.2 million to 29.9 million over the 6-year period. Next slide. So one observation with regards to the water, your water system, you are in a very strong financial position in regards to the water system. So obviously when being submitted to the province, that is noted in our report. Wastewater, it's the same thing. We can go through the various slides of your operating revenue projections. You're looking at a 3 to 4% increase per year. Next slide. Same, we have the growth capital and your replacement capital over the 6-year period. Next slide. Again, with regards to wastewater debt, you can see how it's declining, which is a good thing. Next slide. And with regards to your reserves, your wastewater reserve fund, again, it's not as healthy as the water, but you're still within that target balance of 5 and 10%. Your wastewater development charge reserve, again, you're in a good position. You've got funds available to pay for your growth capital program. Next slide. Again, with your tangible capital asset or your wastewater infrastructure, there are investments being made over the 6-year period. So you can see how your historical cost is going from 27 million to 37 million. And that's because you're investing in infrastructure either through new growth-related projects or replacement of existing assets. Next slide. Again, your wastewater statement of financial operations. You can see how there are annual surpluses generated each year, which is necessary to ensure that funds are available to pay for non-cash expenses like servicing of debt, replacing infrastructure, which is typically at a higher cost than the historical cost, a higher cost than what was spent on that asset when it was put into service originally. Next slide. Again, statement of cash flows. It reconciles the cash transactions over the 6-year period in regards to your operating, capital acquisitions and financing. Again, although cash balances are declining, they're still in a healthy position from 7.3 to 5.8. Next slide. Again, the statement of financial position for wastewater. You can see how the accumulated surplus is increasing from 15 million to 30 million over the 6-year period. Again, the wastewater system is very strong financially, and that will be noted in the report to the province. Next slide. And next slide.
We're on recommendations.
Recommendations, yes, you are. All right. We're recommending that the water and wastewater rate report, that the draft water and wastewater rates as presented be approved at the next, this is where I'm not too sure whether they're being approved tonight or the next council meeting. It says the rate study is draft. Now, one thing that is important that the OREG financial plan as presented be approved to ensure that it meets the deadline for the November 18th deadline, and that the wastewater system just needs to be received by the municipality, or by council, I should say, and that a copy of the financial plan, water and wastewater financial plan, be posted on the township's website, which is a requirement of the regulation. And I think that's it.
Okay.
Before I stop sharing, is there any slides anyone wants to go back to?
I do.
Okay.
I do as well, Karen.
Okay, proceed.
Which one do you want to go back to, Dan? We'll start there.
Okay, slide 51, water capital need projections.
Okay.
Tell me when we're there, Dan. I'm showing slide 46 on mine.
Oh, well, maybe
Is that
it's,
the agenda number, Dan?
it might be the agenda number.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
What number, Dan?
Well, it's 51 in the agenda.
I think it's probably about three slides up.
This one?
Nope,
Keep going up.
Keep going up.
We're getting to the end. This is the recommendations. You want me to go back?
So we're back. Sorry, I say up as in going back. Yes.
It's back about 10 or 12 slides.
So there's the wastewater. So I think he wants to go to the water.
There's the wastewater. Go to the water.
Statement of financial position?
Keep going backwards. Water capital needs projections. So the headline.
Right there. Oh, sorry. Up again. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, one more. One more. There you go.
Right there. Okay. How does it, I mean, when we look at the growth capital over the next 5 years, how does it, I mean, in 2021, we look at $350,000 and then we jump to 2.3 million and then back down and then up and down again. How does that number become what it is? Where does it come from?
So in 2018, the township prepared a development charge background study. And as part of that exercise, they looked at capital requirements necessary on an annual basis. So it's not, so a good example is the Arthur Water Tower, which I think is projected to occur in 2025. And that was a fairly sizable project. I believe we have here about $4.8 million. So that's why you get that blip in 2025. So again, you look at the engineers would look at what investments are needed to service anticipated growth, and they're not going to be all in the same year. So what happens is they look at the investments needed, they look at the cost of that investment, and then there's a determination as to what amount of that capital cost would be deemed growth related. And that portion of cost would be used in the calculation of the development charge rate, whereby that rate, when applied to the anticipated growth, would actually pay for that portion of that growth capital project. And they do that for every project that is deemed to have a growth component, whether it's 1% or 100%.
It just seems like it's, I mean, when you go from like just looking at 2023, I mean, you're hardly spending anything. We're hardly spending anything. And then the year before and 2 years after, we're, into some large numbers.
Yeah, so in the detailed study, what you'll have is you'll have a list of all the projects and all the years those projects are projected to be undertaken. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that, yeah, and maybe in 2023, not a lot of growth projects were identified to be undertaken in that year.
All right. Okay, fair enough.
The other thing to consider, Dan, too, is that sometimes a larger project will only show a small proportion of the total cost as growth related. So that will only show up on that line, whereas the other part of the capital expenditure will show up in the non-growth line.
Right, yeah. Still, they kind of, they like in the 2023, I mean, those are lower numbers altogether.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, okay, fair enough.
Okay, Steve, you had one you wanted to go back to?
Yeah, it was exactly this one, Mayor.
Okay.
The huge fluctuations in the numbers in growth capital. So John has answered them, and thanks, Dan, for asking the same question. So I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions that they'd like to go back to the slides related to? Okay, how about any other questions? Anybody have any other questions regarding the study? We do have a recommendation that comes with the study, so we can proceed to that, and then there's still time for questions after that. So why don't we do that? I've got a motion here moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the draft water and wastewater rates and 2020 OREG 4053/07 water financial plan dated October 26, 2020, prepared by DFIA Infrastructure International, Inc. And further, the council approve in principle that water and wastewater rates will be increased by 1.5% each year from 2022 to 2026, consistent with the study. And with that, we'll open it up for any further questions, comments. Anybody? Dan? Dan, go ahead.
I have no problem receiving the report. I don't know. I need to chew on the increases a little bit longer. I don't know. It's a tough thing to deal with, water and sewer rates. I mean, we've got, I completely understand the need for replacement and those types of things, but we have so many people that just use so little water. We have so many seniors that use so little water, create so little wastewater, and yet are paying the same amount as a family of 6 people. And it's very hard to it's hard to know if that financial justification is right. So like I say, I'm okay with receiving the report. When is it supposed to come back? Is it coming back in a week's time, or is it like, do we have any kind of say in saying, well, maybe we think it should be 1%, 1.5% for 2 years, or 1% for the last 3 years? Do we have any kind of say in that?
Matt, do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. I guess some comments I would have is the 1.5% is based on just trying to match what we presume CPI would be. Again, we already have a rate study endorsed for 2021 at 2%, but certainly council can weigh in as it relates to what that 1.5% is over the period 2022 to 2026. But I think the reason the recommendation is what it is to try to match CPI. And then I guess another comment would be is I think the rate study as it's before you shows that water meter installation is 2027, because staff recognize there needs to be a move to have water meters as far as charge people based on consumption, but that's kind of what's before you to provide some additional clarification or information.
Do you have anything further you wanted to ask at this point, Dan, or?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, we can come back around if we don't get where you want to go here. So let's see who else has a question. Anybody? Sherry, go ahead.
So I'm glad to hear Matt say that we're looking at water meters being proposed for 2027. Yeah, I guess I have some concern with regards to the increase just because of the timing. And I hate to always go back and say, well, it's COVID, but I think that that's where we are now. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration, being as the next presentation that we have is there's going to be discussion around, 0 rate increase. So I sort of see where Dan's coming from. So I don't know if there's a way that we can, have some additional time now that we've gone through the numbers, or whether it has to be done all as one package.
But I think we do have the deadline, if I'm not mistaken, of November the 18th to submit the financial plan with that. So I guess there is an opportunity for one more council cycle, but beyond that, if we need to meet that deadline. Okay. Go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just think that that was a lot of information to go through on our own. And now that some of it has been presented a little bit more clearer, and maybe we have some additional time to sort of reflect on that. And if there are other questions, because I'd like to go back through that and just reevaluate some of what we've already heard. So if it can be put onto the next council meeting, then we would still be able to meet that November 18th deadline.
The only caution I would throw into that is that we would have to have a final decision by our next council meeting. So if we think that revisions need to be made,
Right.
we need to address that sooner rather than later in order to meet the deadline requirements. Because if we wait till the next meeting and say we want to make adjustments here, then we're going to have to be into a special meeting to meet the deadline.
Okay, so we'd be better off to have sort of that discussion if we don't think 1.5 is where we want to be at now. We should have that discussion now.
Yes, I believe so. Okay. Steve?
I'm all right with the 1.5 increase over the next couple of years, because I'd rather have it consistent than lower it this year, because as Councillor Burke said, because of COVID, and then 2 years down the road have to jack it to 3.5 instead. I'd rather have it consistent like this is at the 1.5.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah, I guess one of my questions is the comparators that was in that study, and I forget what slide it was, doesn't really matter. There weren't a whole lot of places that were sort of our neighbors, if you will. I mean, Southgate was, but I would also suggest that most of those municipalities that were on there weren't of the same size we are. So I'm going to put this out to, I guess, Matt, or if the presenter is on, if they can give us some information as to municipalities that are more compatible to our size with regards to the rates.
Matt?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I'd defer to John if you could comment.
Well, we can look at again, working with Matt, to look at municipalities that would the township would typically compare against. Now, every municipality's water and wastewater systems are different based on geographic location. I mean, even if proximity, their systems may be totally different than yours. So we can look at different municipalities that are deemed by the township to be most appropriate for comparison, whether they're in close proximity based on size, but you may get the same result that your one system, water system, is relatively inexpensive. Again, it's when we were looking at a typical residential user that consumes 180 cubic meters per year. Now, the township currently does not meter residential customers, and therefore it's going to be hard to compare against other municipalities that do have meters, because with the volumetric rate, with a as we use a single retiree may only use 5 cubic meters per month, and therefore would pay probably a lot less under a metered system than a system that only has a flat rate. So it is hard to compare, especially residential customers in the township, to others because that have a metered system. So we can look at municipalities that are in close proximity to the township, as well as some municipalities that are of the same customer base, if you will.
I have a question in regard to kind of the regulatory requirement around this financial plan. If we were to decide that we thought metering was something we wanted to go proceed with more quickly, does regulation require us to resubmit the plan in the intervening years, or is that something we just adjust 5 years from now?
No, it's the province requires that the financial plan be submitted as part of your renewal application. The province requires that council adopt that financial plan, but it doesn't prevent municipality from amending the financial plan. And I know you had talked about having to come back before November 18th to approve rates. But if council were to adopt the financial plan based on the draft study, and that financial plan is submitted to the province, that financial plan can be amended if council were to adopt rates that were different than what is being recommended in the draft rate study. So it allows for municipality to meet the deadline in regards to their renewal application, while still giving council time to discuss and debate rates after the November 18th deadline.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Steve, you're muted. I think it looks like you're talking.
I'm good. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Mike, I see your hand up.
So John, just for clarification around your last statement, we have a recommendation in front of our council to receive the financial plan, and that in principle accept the 1.5% increases as per, which is what is the plan is based on right now. Did your comment you just made indicate that even if council at a later date after November 18th chose to make a change to those rates, that still doesn't keep us from submitting the plan as is?
So what council would do is receive or adopt this financial plan based on the draft rate study. And once council approves the final rate study, and should there be any changes, then you still have an application that has been submitted with a financial plan that has been adopted by council. But should that financial plan be amended, that amended financial plan can be submitted to the province. And we've done that in the past. All the province wants is an application, preferably an application that has all the information that they've requested as part of the regulation. Some municipalities have not met that deadline in regards to the financial plan. All they've done is submitted a letter indicating to the province that the financial plan is in the process of being prepared and that it will be submitted at a later date. And the province has always come back with, thank you very much, that's fine. So in as much as municipalities want to meet all the requirements as stated by the province, sometimes that's not possible. And the province is thankful that municipalities informed them of the timing challenges in regards to the preparation of the financial plan. The application is still submitted. It's just submitted less the financial plan with a note from the municipality that that financial plan is in the process of being prepared and will be submitted at a later date. So yes, the municipality can submit an amended financial plan at a later date should they choose.
Karen?
So procedurally, we've got 2 paragraphs to this resolution. Are you saying, John, that we should amend the motion that's on the floor to remove the reference we're approving in principle the increase by 1.5 and just receive the draft? Is that what the resolution should be?
I think in a perfect world, you'd receive well, and I don't say draft. You don't want to receive the draft financial plan. You want to adopt it. You want to receive the draft rate study. You want to adopt the financial plan based on that draft rate study, which kind of implies that there's a chance that rate study, when it's finalized, may be changed. So what you're doing is you're adopting a financial plan based on a draft study, and that once that study is finalized and approved, and if that leads to changes to the financial plan, an amended financial plan would be submitted to the province. So they're going to get an application package which will have an adopted financial plan that may, should council change anything in the rate study, impact on that financial plan.
Okay. So lots of options. Let's just back up a little bit if I can to try to nail down where we're at here. So Councillor Yake has expressed a desire to hold off on approving the financial plan. I think maybe Councillor Burke is supporting that too, but I'm not sure, and I haven't got a sense from the others as to where we're at with that as well. So I'd like to clarify that a little bit. And then I'd also like to, the concern I'm hearing really is that 1.5% annual increase may be more than we think is appropriate. And I guess the question then would be, well, what inputs would we ask to be altered in order to change that? And since about 60% of the annual operating budget is infrastructure, renewal, and capital related, that's probably where we would need to look. So does that mean then that we wish to roll back the amount of infrastructure we want to spend on our water system? Or does that mean we want to reduce the amount of, shave our reserve amounts down in order to reduce the rate increase? So I guess some sort of guidance as to where we might go with that I think would be valuable as well. So just let's start. Is everybody on, looking to defer this to another time, or are we ready to go ahead? If we can start with that and just kind of get an indication of where we're at. Dan, go ahead.
I'm okay with approving it and moving ahead with the financial plan, as long as we can have, and like I said, I'm concerned about the numbers. It's a 9% increase over 5 years. I mean, that's a little steep, I think. We've seen all these numbers, and there's certainly a lot to take in here in this report. So, I mean, I'm okay if we need to move it forward, but I just my concern is the numbers, and I guess if we don't have that discussion and we don't change them or look at changing them tonight, then we probably never will. But that's just my concern. My biggest concern is the 9.5% over 5 years, and I know it needs to be done, but I think the impact on some of the people that live in our community is too great. But if that's the wishes of council, then I can accept that.
Okay. Steve, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thanks.
You just muted yourself, Steve.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I know with the 10% over that short a time period it does seem like a lot to chew off, but with the more like going back to the seniors comment, Dan, and I think if I understand John properly, with metered housing, yeah, there'd be a 1.5% increase, but it would be on a much lower number than what they're paying now, I think. Is that right, John?
But you'd have winners and losers. So your base charge would probably be cut in half. And that senior living by themselves would probably see their bill cut in half almost.
Right.
But you'd have families that would see a significant increase. So it's a zero-sum game. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, but at the end of the day, it'll be the same amount that we recovered from the ratepayer.
Right.
Okay.
But again, we've heard growth pays for growth. So the people that use the water pay for it. The people that don't use it don't pay for it. You know, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, no, it then becomes far more user pay as opposed to shared cost if we go to that route.
Mhm.
But let's not forget too that a big proportion of the bill, like from the presentation tonight, 60% of the bill goes to infrastructure renewal. So that's really for the pipes running past people's houses for the most part. That doesn't get any cheaper if they put a meter in. So, you know, half to 60% of the bill still is going to be going to that, whether you used any water at all or not. And then the people who are the heavier users inevitably will pay more. At the same time, those who are particularly light users would pay less. But if we think that the metering is the fairer way to go, then maybe we need to be having that discussion sooner rather than later. Go ahead, Dan.
Metering's been on the table for many years here in Wellington North. And it's always been, well, we've talked about it, but we just kind of shove it off to the side, you know, due to the cost, the installation costs, the maintenance costs, the whole cost of metering is a whole other, it's a whole other thing, right? So, I mean, it's been talked about many, many times, and unless we're committed to going that route, you know, it may just continue to be put off. I guess that's just the reality of the situation. So,
yeah.
But it seems to me like there doesn't seem to be an appetite to change any numbers here or to make any adjustments, and I don't see it. I don't feel it. So, I mean, we might as well move ahead with it and get the process, you know, underway.
Okay. Councillor Burke or Councillor Hearn, do you have anything you'd like? Go ahead, Sherry.
So I would like to see the number adjusted, and Mayor Lennox, you had suggested that, you know, some dollars may come from the reserves or infrastructure projects may have to be declined, but I think maybe if it was a combination, I also would like to have the metered conversation sooner than later. I think we've all talked about this before, and we're looking at it being pushed out to 2027. So I'm okay to move forward with the report, and if we can go back and amend it, but I think we sort of have to have that discussion now. If there isn't the appeal to have that number changed by the majority of council, then there's no point in trying to bring it back. We should just proceed with the way the recommendation reads. But I would like to, you know, at least be able to have that opportunity to have that discussion of changing the rate. I think it's too steep at this time, and whether it has to be altered at a later date because of putting in meters or, you know, a new water tower or what have you, but I think we need to have that discussion.
Okay. Lisa, do you have any comments you wanted to share?
I have a lot of thoughts floating around. I'm quite comfortable actually with the 1.5% increase. The increase that bothers me is the one in 2021. You know, I find that the 2% in 2021 kind of steep, but that's based on the 2015 study. But the 1.5% falls in line basically with the consumer, or with the CPI. It just kind of amazes me how many people undervalue water. You know, I think the value for what they're getting, you know, for what they're paying is actually really, really good. I mean, there's no way I could ever buy a well and a septic for this and maintain it and be guaranteed, you know, that my water's tested and all of that great stuff and have it delivered to your door and all of that. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with the 1.5, but it's the 2% that bothers me, just, you know, just with the timing and everything.
Okay. A lot of stuff going on with this conversation. So I'm just going to try to summarize. So I'm hearing some concern with the amount of increase, both current and future. I'm hearing a lot of conversation or concern around the, you know, maybe we should be moving forward with metering. If we are to adjust rates, yeah, that's going to either, you know, we're going to slow down on our renewal of infrastructure, or we're going to, you know, not increase our reserves to the target range where they ought to be, which, if we're going to go down the road of metering, is a concern to me, because there's going to be, as Councillor Yake pointed out, significant cost attached to installing meters, installing the equipment, maintaining it. And if we go to metering and everybody's rates go up at that point, that's not going to be received really very well either, I don't believe. We also have issues in some of our locations with discoloration in water, that some of our residents who are paying these rates would really like to see some changes happen in that regard. So I'm really nervous about us shaving this too much because of the, you know, we're talking about major changes here. If we go to metering, or if we address some of these other issues, to take those reserve dollars away at this point, I would really struggle with that. I would be supportive of us moving to a metering system sooner rather than later. And I would be supportive of that, as, you know, rewarding those who are low users, and helping to address some of that affordability for some of our residents. And the other side of it too is, you know, we often talk about sewage treatment capacity, you know, and how expensive sewage treatment capacity is. Well, one of the big levers that we have at our disposal to increase our capacity is to improve water conservation. And meterings are a big step. Metering is a big step towards water conservation. And I think it has benefit of potentially reducing long-term cost and increased growth capacity for us in our municipality. So while I recognize the concern with the dollars right now, I think that we probably need to keep as close to this sort of a plan as we possibly can, so that we can meet some of these challenges going down the road. If I personally would be probably willing to support a very short-term rate reduction for 2021, but I think beyond that, I think the 1.5% looks pretty reasonable to me. So, is there other aspects of this from anybody that I've missed, and am I trying to sum it up? But so I guess the next question is, I mean, I'm hearing a general interest in moving forward, and I see you've got your camera on, Matt, so I'm going to get to you in a second here. But I also am sensing that we want to revisit this from a number of perspectives, whether it's metering or adjusting rates or those types of things going forward. So if that's where council's at, then I think that's what we ought to do, is just approve what we have in front of us and set a time or a recommendation request to staff to bring this back for further discussion. And I'd love to hear what each of you have to say about any of that. And Matt, did you want to add something before we do that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. My only comment would be if John says adopt is the right term as it relates to the 1.5, then that would be appropriate direction for 2021 rates, is something that we just wouldn't bring a revision to a future fees and charges bylaw. And if council's wish is that staff bring a report about metering to a future meeting of council, that kind of direction we'd be completely on board for.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just go around and see where everybody's at. Steve, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm fine with this how it is, because I mean, if we ever do end up going to metering, it'd be nice to have some reserves to maybe pull on for that. But yeah, I'm all right with this, because you know, as John has said and Councillor Yake has said, growth has to pay for growth.
Okay, Sherry.
I'm okay to approve what we have, because I think in the comments that Matt has just made, we can direct staff to bring back additional reports, so then we can also have additional conversations about the rates, because perhaps we need to keep those rates at that level to do the put in the meters. But I think by giving staff some direction on, you know, having the metering discussion, this keeps us sort of in the forefront as opposed to the back burner. So I'm not really happy with the 1.5, but because we can go back and amend it, I'm okay to do that for now.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
I'd be happy with removing the 2% in 2021 and going with the 1.5 for the following 5 years.
Okay.
That's my offer, or my recommendation.
Okay. I think in order to do that, we have to accept what we have in front of us, and then we'll get staff to revisit and come back. Karen, I see your hand up.
Right. Fair enough.
Karen?
So the resolution that's in front of you needs a friendly amendment. You're going to change it to read: the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North received the draft water and wastewater rates, and further that 2020 OREG 43507 water, and further that council adopt 2020 OREG 45307 water financial plan dated, et cetera, and remove the last clause that says, and further that council approve in principle. 1.5, that will come out.
Okay, and we had Sherry and Steve as the mover and seconder of that. Are you guys okay with that? Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add before we draw this to a close?
Not really. I'm totally okay to move forward with it as it is.
Okay, Matt?
Karen, and maybe I misheard, did you reference the October 26th report?
Yes.
Yeah, so that report says 1.5%. So I think removing it, like I think that report says the 1.5%, but it can be amended in the future. So I don't think that's the issue, but so
Do you want to leave that in there?
No, and maybe I just wanted to, I guess, be clear that what we'd be submitting to the Ministry of Environment would be the October 26th report, which does show the 1.5%, but it can be amended in the future. That's maybe the only point I want to make.
Well, and I think it's consistent with what we've heard around the table too, because it focuses that 1.5 on the 2022 to 2026 period, which is the new period. The consensus I'm hearing around adjusting rates is for 2021, which is the tail end of the previous period.
Okay, we'll leave that in.
So I think we can leave it as is unless we need to change approve to adopt.
Yes, we'll change that to adopt.
Okay, so that's the only change we're going to make then, is change the word approve to adopt in the second clause.
Okay, yep.
Okay, any final questions or comments before we charge ahead? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Just so I have the minutes noted correctly, immediately following that, there's going to be direction to staff to bring a report to a future meeting of council regarding metering.
And to revisit the 2021 rate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and John, if you're still with us, thanks very much for your presentation and input on this process.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. So now we'll move back to our number one presentation, and that's our initial look at the 2021 budget. Adam, I haven't seen your face yet, but I'm sure you're here with us.
I am indeed. Thank you, Mayor Lennox and members of council. Just let me share my screen here. So thank you very much. And upfront apologies for subjecting council to back-to-back financial presentations on a Monday evening. I know that might be a little bit difficult to palate, but all the same, thank you for taking time to hear me present about the 2021 budget overview, where staff have prepared a preliminary iteration of the 2021 operating budget and are seeking direction from council on a few items to facilitate the completion of the 2021 capital program and fully loaded budget for the Township of Wellington North. So in terms of the 2021 budget process, the aim, as in prior years, of the annual budget is to focus and deliver on the values of council for the Township of Wellington North. An in-depth review of interfunctional transfers was conducted in July and August of 2020. Budget templates were subsequently sent to department heads on August 28th. I had held meetings with department heads during September and October as required. And this evening represents the first meeting of council and staff with additional meetings to be held on November 9th and November 23rd. In terms of budget guidelines, staff had frozen most operating account budgets at 2020 levels unless cost pressures were otherwise documented. And based on our canvassing our vendor network, we did identify some corporate-wide cost pressures. Wages and salaries, there have been some budgeted increases which vary by department. And based on feedback from our plan administrator, health benefits have seen an increase of 10.7% based on preliminary guidance. However, we did recently receive some information that would suggest that that number is not going to be quite that high. And the next iteration of the draft can be inclusive of that reduction. The municipal insurance renewal would suggest a 10% increase year over year based on direction from our insurance broker. And utilities guidance has been a 2% increase year over year from Wellington North Power, or LDC. In terms of some additional 2021 budget impact items, Conservation Authority budgets have not yet been received. However, the budget does include provisions based on expectations. There have been minimal municipal service level changes for save and except for that of recreation, where lasting impacts of COVID remain uncertain, and assumptions have been made when formulating the 2021 budget. Most notably, community center revenues and arena revenues have been decreased from those of the 2020 budget targets. Some additional impacts and considerations for 2021 are the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. Allocation is not yet known, and the budget as going to be presented assumes a 15% year-over-year reduction. The budget also assumes that the FCM Green Municipal Loan associated with the Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant Phase 1 construction works will be paid over a 10-year time frame. However, there is some flexibility that exists to extend beyond that time frame should council wish to do that. Sustainability of aggressive capital programs certainly remains in question in light of COVID and some of the other tax levy pressures that we're seeing into 2021. And another item is new and alternative revenue streams to bridge funding gaps are very much uncertain. The caveat to that would be that Wellington North was the recipient of $311,000 of Phase 1 Safe Restart funding in October of this year, which was to be geared specifically to 2020 operating cost pressures borne by the COVID-19 global pandemic. However, uncertainty still very much does remain around opportunities for future revenue streams beyond the 2020 timeframe. A quick discussion on growth versus reassessment. Growth is defined as new assessment and has no impact on the existing taxpayer. And during 2020, Wellington North has realized an estimated real assessment growth of 1.52%. That in comparison to prior years of 1.53 and 1.12 respectively over 2019 and 2018. Another caveat to that is that MPAC is still finalizing some of those growth numbers, and I think they're doing the final round of supplementary up to and including the first week of November. So that number is subject to change, but in all likelihood, that is not going to change materially from the 1.52%. Also worth noting is that there's no scheduled increase in assessment due to the province-wide reassessment done by MPAC for 2021. The COVID-19 global pandemic has been the largest impetus for the deferral of the assessment. So just keeping in mind that all current value assessment is still predicated on 2016 values, which have been phased in over the last 4 years. So in terms of the operating budget summary, we'll be looking at the operating budget comparison from the 2020 to 2021 budget values. It does include updated contributions to and from reserve and reserve funds. It does not yet include contributions to capital, but it does have the baked in interfunctional transfers for 2021. No real material changes in that aspect. However, there have been some reallocations between operating segments. So getting right into the meat and potatoes of things, the operating budget by business segment, we'll look at it by FIR category. The first segment is general government, and you'll see that top line within this table. General government has seen a fairly sharp decline in revenues of $317,000 or 18%. That's largely driven by the reduction or the assumed reduction in OMPF funding into 2021, the 15% reduction. In addition to that reduction, we've also seen a trend whereby our revenues are decreasing on penalties on taxes. Kind of a bittersweet story in the sense that we are doing some good collections, but it's not driving the revenues we would otherwise see in that segment. Also, we've seen a bit of a decline in terms of our investment revenues. Our cash on deposit is fairly strong. However, market forces have been driving down the interest rates, which is seeing a decline in some of those revenues there. Next item of note would be the administration group, a 7.6% year-over-year increase or $70,000. That's largely borne by the budget guidance for the group benefits, as previously mentioned. However, we can right-size that upon the final submission once we understand what the actual market forces are going to be from that perspective. And also some changes in the interfunctional transfers within that group driving that year-over-year change. Into the protection services segment, you'll see the top line item there, the fire segment, an increase in year-over-year budgets and operating perspective of 8.7% or $74,000. Largest drivers there really being the additional contributions to reserve and reserve funds to facilitate the SCBA bottle replacement program, which is going to be transpiring in the next few years. And in order to effectively normalize or minimize the fluctuations within the levy ask, we are seeing some additional contributions to reserve and reserve funds now to facilitate later purchases for that fleet renewal. In addition to that, in terms of the reserve and reserve fund, there have been some increases to employee benefits, namely WSIB for the fire group, which has been an increasing trend within that segment. So effectively just right-sizing that in order to facilitate the budget increase into 2021. As previously mentioned, the Conservation Authority, we haven't got firm and fast numbers as yet, but the budget does assume a 3.6% year-over-year increase in terms of the CA levy to the municipality, or $5,800. And animal control, an increase there year-over-year, largely driven by a reduction in perceived licensing revenues, just given that we are in between remunerations, and we typically do see between remunerations a bit of a drop off in terms of our revenues in that segment. Transportation services is effectively flat, a small reduction year-over-year from an operating perspective. We did see some group benefit costs included in that business segment. However, those increases have been offset by a reduction in the interfunctional transfer allocation and the internalization of some of the street sweeping activities with the purchase of the new machine and less reliance on outsourcing some of that. The largest item within this page next down the line is rec and cultural services. We'll see Parks and Recreation, a fairly sharp year-over-year increase of 24%, or $309,000. That's largely borne by increased wage and benefit costs associated with increased sanitization processes and other things of that nature borne by the COVID pandemic, and also the decline, perceived decline in revenues from the community centers and arenas as previously mentioned. Into the planning and development category, we'll see planning see a slight decrease year-over-year, $43,000. That's effectively just right-sizing our anticipated involvement with the county and their associated costs for planning activities around that, just kind of getting in line with trends and perceived volumes in 2021. Economic development will see a small year-over-year decrease, about $6,500 or 2.6%. We did see some increased costs from a wages and benefits perspective, and also some business retention and expansion expense or cost increases. However, those are going to be offset by reductions in youth council, interfunctional transfer costs, and also some additional perceived revenues from a grant perspective. And rounding it out, we have municipal drains up about 21% year-over-year, or $8,000. That's largely driven by a knowledge transfer whereby we're looking to transition our drainage superintendent costs from an outsourced party to a shared services relationship with one of our member municipalities. So that's the largest factor driving that increase year-over-year. So in aggregate, we'll see approximately a $713,000 year-over-year increase from an operating pressure perspective, or a 13.4%. Also, what would be feeding the fully loaded budget for the Township of Wellington North into 2021 would be some capital considerations in terms of contributions from the levy to some of our capital program. The top table effectively shows our recent trend. We've got 2018 through 2020 with contributions from levy north of $2.1 million and growing incrementally each year. And as previously mentioned, the 2021 operating pressures are already seeing an operating only levy increase of approximately $713,000. So in order to maintain a 0% levy increase for 2021, the levy capital program contributions would have to be cut from the current levy impact of $2.3 million to $1.75 million. Otherwise, additional contributions from reserve and reserve funds would have to be considered. Looking at the net transfers from an operating standpoint in terms of what is currently presented in the draft operating budget, we do see the comparatives of 2020 to 2021. You'll see from a taxation total perspective, a fairly significant increase in terms of contributions to, or net transfers to reserve and reserve funds year over year. That's largely driven by the additional contributions to fire for the SCBA ball replacement, and the no necessity to facilitate transfer from reserve and reserve funds from an operating pressures perspective, as a lot of the debt servicing costs associated with some of the levy generated service provisions being completed as of 2020. User fees, you'll see the net transfers remains fairly static, a slight year-over-year reduction. Again, largely driven by the finalization of some of the debt servicing costs. However, the sewer line item does take into consideration the new debenture servicing costs associated with the FCM Green Municipal Fund debenture, based on the assumptions previously noted. So on balance, we will see a fairly significant increase in terms of the net transfers to and reserve funds, going from a previous deficit position to this year now growing the reserve and reserve funds to an area where we're now starting to see some contributions to where we can start building for the future again. And just a quick slide here on reserve and reserve fund balances. We saw 2018 close the year of $24.3 million. 2019 saw the year-end close at $15.3 million balance, and we're currently just north of $14 million as of Q3 2020. The fairly precipitous decline from 2018 to 2019 was effectively the township front-ending the costs associated with the build of the Phase 1 Arthur Wastewater Treatment Plant, and the decline from 2019 to current levels, additional contributions to facilitate our fairly aggressive capital programs for the last few years. This slide here, just a few items of note, or items that bear reiterating. 2020 organic growth, 1.52%. A bit of a disheartening number considering the diligent efforts by staff to have assessment growth captured. For example, the new Canadian Tire Mount Forest and the tremendous number of building permits being issued and having those being captured by MPAC in terms of additional assessment. However, we do continue to have issues as it pertains to the farm tax incentive program and assessment flipping from farm assessment to residential back to farm. So it's kind of hard for us to pick a valid growth number with those constantly in a state of flux. Also worth it reiterating is that there is no phased-in assessment growth for 2021. We're still in a bit of a holding pattern until MPACs be able to get out in the field again and generate some of that reassessment so we can start seeing some of those phased-in growth numbers coming back to fruition. And uncertainty certainly does still remain as it pertains to the OMPF funding available for 2021. And of course, the elephant in the room is the COVID-19 global pandemic remaining a fluid issue, and certain assumptions have been made when preparing the 2021 operating budget. So now for the ask, I suppose. Staff is currently seeking direction from council in terms of what it would feel would be a palatable levy for 2021. As previously mentioned, in order to facilitate the 0% increase on the existing taxpayer, we would effectively have to drop contributions to capital from the $2.3 million mark to the $1.751 million mark to see that impact on existing taxpayer of 0. And to put that in context, in order to facilitate similar contributions to capital as last year, the $2.35 million, we would have to have a 7.8% year-over-year increase. In the table below, you'll see a variety of property types and the typical assessment 2020 and 2021, the prior year's township tax rates based on those assessment values, and the change 2021 would bear in terms of dollars and a percentage change. So you can see, in order to facilitate contributions to capital equal to that of 2020, some fairly significant growth there in terms of the impact on the existing taxpayer. So at this point, I might take a bit of a break and let council deliberate, and I can model a couple of different values within that contributions to capital number, depending upon what council's appetite is for a rate increase for the 2021 calendar year.
Okay, so maybe before we do that, Adam, I would just go around the table and see if anybody has any questions for clarification at this point.
Certainly.
And I can't see anybody right now, so please speak up. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask just to clarify the presentation so far?
I'm good for now, Andy.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Anybody else?
I'm good for now as well.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, carry on.
okay, so I guess really what then this is back to us to talk about if, you know, what we think the appropriate increase or not of the tax levy should be, and then of course how we get there, given the additional costs that we're dealing with related to COVID-19 and the loss in revenue, et cetera, which is what's big part of what's driving the increases to the operating budget. So open the floor for any kind of discussion, get things rolling here on that front. Again, I can't see everybody, so please speak up.
I was going to say thanks again, Adam, for putting this all together and laying it out as far as we've gotten so far. I'm on page 16, and I don't really see much wrong with this until we get into the discussion of perhaps some stuff in the upcoming budget for next year that could maybe be looked at as well. So I don't really have that many questions on this right now. And I always say, Adam, if I can understand this, you're doing a hell of a job. So
Thank you.
I think one of the questions we have to ask or have to answer as well is, you know, we've got two scenarios presented in front of us, a 0% tax increase and a 7 point something, I don't remember the exact number, tax increase. You know, where are we comfortable? Are we okay with scaling back on capital expenditures? Those are some of the things we need to give staff some direction on as well. Okay, I can see everybody now, so you can put your hand up if you want to weigh in here. So, anybody want to dive in? Mike.
Mayor Lennox, yeah, I can speak basically in terms of, from a staff perspective, we anticipate that council will be supportive of scaling back the capital program this year to alleviate some of the pressures as it relates to the overall levy impact. So we're prepared for that. We've had those conversations internally. And I would suggest an expectation that will be part of the direction that we'll hear from council. I would suggest, you know, Adam has done a really good job in terms of preparing the operating budget with that in mind as well. He is conservative as it relates to the OMPF number, which is probably smart, but a week from now, we may hear positive news that will have significant impact around that piece. And on the recreation side, yeah, we're talking about $300,000 difference, and a lot of it really relates to the fact that we don't anticipate the revenue that we normally get because of the impacts of COVID. So I think we have to budget that way on the operating side of things. The unknown is, do we continue to gear towards a scaled back capital program in 2021 so that our overall levy expectations are near zero? Assuming that that's the direction that council wants to go. And I think the previous conversation about water and wastewater rates would suggest that staff is in line with council. So I think that's positive, but I also think that we've heard a lot of conversation in the last little while, the last 6 months, about projects that council's also encouraged about and looking forward to discussing. You know, things like Queen Street East, the connecting link project there, or, you know, what if we're not successful with that project? I think there's significant pressure on all of us, council specifically, that there needs to be something happening on that stretch of roads sooner than later. Rural broadband is a topic that has come up repeatedly at this council table. Is there an expectation that we are contributing towards addressing that issue? And in order, when I say contributing, I mean financially. The Arthur Streetscape, these are the items that were identified by the BAA and the chamber as part of the connecting link work that's going to happen in Arthur. We anticipate the council wants to support that. We've talked about the Arthur Community Center, about doing some significant refurbishment work there. So another big capital project that is looming. The extension of servicing along Wells Street, again, a topic that's reached this table a number of times. Are we prepared to move ahead with those type of projects too? So we'll bring a scaled capital program based on the expectation of what the levy is, and then try and prioritize the best we can. But yeah, I think if there are other projects that council is anticipating as part of the 2021 capital projects, we'd love to hear about them now, so we can, maybe throw some that we've identified to the back of the bus and put the council ones at the front of the bus. So I've highlighted a few, but I anticipate there's more than those. That maybe this is an opportunity to hear some of those from council as we dig further into the capital discussion and the overall budget.
Okay, Steve, you're muted.
I guess with the tour that we were a part of today, in looking at the Arthur Works and the County Works building, and then the Mapleton and County Wellington buildings over in Drayton, I've really got a hammer on the Wells Street approach. I think it would make perfect sense to, doesn't have to be up to, I don't know, a county standard, but at least opening it up so that the county in the next, as we know, the time schedule is very tight for the county wanting to do something in Arthur. And having access right off of the Con Road to a possible location where there is a joint building and a joint public works yard would only really make sense, I think, to open that up again and just have it for truck traffic only. So there's that one. And then I would like to maybe discuss probably the paving of Side Road 4 here in the geographical area of Arthur Township as well. There's, I don't know how many calls Sherry gets or how many calls you get, Andy, but I know I get a lot of calls about the fourth. And I know we've talked about this in past budget conversations, but I think if we can put some weight behind paving all of Side Road 4.
I just clarify, Councillor McCabe, are we talking concession 4 north?
Sorry, concession 4, sorry, yes.
Okay. Yep, no, just wanted to make sure.
Yep. Yeah, so concession 4, sorry, thanks, Mike, and then Wells Street.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in here? Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, so
Sherry, go ahead.
To Councillor McCabe's comments, it's concession 4 north that I'd like to see move ahead. It's been discussed over and over again. And the other thing that I would like to see move forward is we had a lot of talks about the service club signage at the gateway entrances here in Mount Forest, and it's not going to be a BIA project, and because of the location, But I think something needs to be done with those service club signs now that the other gateway signage has been updated. So I don't know whose budget that falls under. And also just to talk about the levy increase. Yeah, 7.8 I don't think is palatable. We've often talked about what could we do for our residents to help them cope with the impacts of COVID-19. And I think being reasonable and rational with the moderate levy increase would be one of those things that we could do for our community as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Dan, Lisa?
I'm good for now.
Okay. Lisa,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Like Councillor Burke, I'm very leery of any large increases at this point in time. I feel so many people are underemployed, let alone unemployed at this point in time. And this is kind of maybe taking things off topic, Adam. And I was kind of wondering whether you have the ability to provide some sort of snapshot as to how our taxpayers are doing financially in comparison to other years, like whether they're behind on their taxes more this year than in the previous couple years. Is that a possibility?
It certainly is. I can say, based on conversations internally and also with the county treasurers group, is that surprisingly, or perhaps maybe not so surprisingly, our collections are and still remain quite strong. I would say we're probably trailing years prior in terms of a similar time frame. However, there were some deferrals that were approved by council, and we are still playing catch up on those. But by and large, I would suggest we're in a very good stead. And you may have heard me mention in the general government line item, we are seeing penalties on taxes actually kind of trailing where we've seen in historical trend. So that's again a good news story in the sense that we are doing quite well and not having so many things in arrears. But in terms of a detailed report, I'm happy to bring that forward to a future meeting of council.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess my turn to weigh in. In terms of the levy, that's really our outward facing message to the public. We have a lot of levers at our disposal within our organization to decide where we spend the dollars. But in terms of the outward facing piece, I think, yeah, we have to maintain a pretty modest 2021 tax impact. I'd like to see it, I think, certainly less than we've had in previous years. I'm not sure that zero is a smart idea, but something, in that lower end would be something I would be supportive of. I look at where the big impact on our operating budget is coming from. A big part of it is a revenue reduction that we hope is short-lived. We hope that, that's 2020, 2021, and then hopefully we're getting back closer to normal. So this is a 1 year kind of, let's hope, a 1 year or 1.5 year aberration. So we would expect that revenue to come back over the longer term. So I think to take a short holiday from maybe some of our capital expenditures to address that short-term need, it makes sense. Another big part of that change in our operating budget is the OMPF. And I'm very hopeful that our provincial counterparts will not pass on a 15% reduction to us at this particular moment, because I'm sure we're not the only recipient of OMPF funds that are going to face this same challenge. So if we take out the unusual, hopefully 1 year reduction in revenues from the recreation, and we be very confident that we would get, that 100% of the 2020 allocation to OMPF, the impact on our operating budget is significantly less, and quite significantly less. So I would like to see us continue to plow as much as we possibly can into those capital expenditures. Now, we can't plan for that because there's a lot of unknowns in the future. But if the opportunity presents itself and we have those resources, we can either put them into reserves for a future expenditure, or we can, spend what we can. The other thing that, if there are really important capital expenditures that we think need to be done in 2021, we have another lever at our disposal as well, and that is the lever of debt. We have not taken on debt, or we have used up some of our reserves. We haven't taken on debt if we feel that there's things that need to happen. That's another lever that we have at our disposal. So I think from an outward-facing perspective, I think it needs to be very modest. And then I think we need to be serious about what our priorities are. And if there's projects that we need to do, then we need to find a way to do them, whether it's from reserves, whether it's from pushing it off for a year, whether it's taking on some debt over and above what's already been planned. Those are all options that we need to consider. So I think, scaling back a little bit on capital right now, I think is appropriate, but that doesn't mean we've lost track of where we're going in terms of capital renewal, planning for growth, addressing those issues that growth will require. I think we have the flexibility. We're in a very fortunate financial position compared to many of our comparators, which gives us the freedom to make those decisions in a timely way and not be held back simply because of this 1 year or hopefully 1 year aberration. So I'm happy for staff to continue with keeping the tax levy low, and then let's have an honest discussion about what we think is the highest priority and figure out a way to do it. So that probably puts too many options on your table, Adam, but
it does provide a roadmap, Mayor Lennox. That gives us something to operate on. We know what the 0% levy increase number is. We can certainly take away, look at the capital program with Ernest, make some tough decisions around what our real priorities are, and come back to council on the next meeting of council in November and present what staff have come up with.
Yeah, and that would give council the opportunity to, if there's things that are not included in that capital expenditure plan, that we could then consider other ways to finance those things if there's things that we think we really need to get on with. So, Steve, you're muted, by the way.
I'm on now. I finally got on tonight. I would suggest one thing with regards to the budget is the levy for the conservation authorities. I know just sitting on SVCA, it's not a pretty sight because as has been seen, our rec council or recreation has been hit very hard, and so has the at least Saugeen has been hit hard as well. So I know there'll be probably an increase of a levy ask from the three conservation authorities that we support, so, or that we are part of. So we've got to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and I know that I asked Mike the question if we could use some of those provincial funds to help cover that off with the conservation authorities, because I think Saugeen will not be alone in this regard. So, well, I think we've got what 3.4% increase in the proposal here. It could be higher than that for sure. Mike?
Yeah, Mayor Lennox. Yeah, you addressed one of the things. Yeah, I guess my question was maybe more geared towards Councillor McCabe, and he's maybe not in a position to answer yet. But yeah, we have budgeted, or Adam has budgeted, the 3.6% increase. Are you suggesting that that's a little on the light side, that when we bring our revision back, it should be higher than that? Now, recognizing that that we've had positive information in regards to our benefits, that will be a reduction in what you're seeing tonight, but we want to be as realistic as possible. So if 3.6 is not up to snuff, it's better to have that conversation now. And just before you have an opportunity to answer, the dollars that we got for the safe restart, we've been told up until this point that it needed to be focused on 2020 operating impact. So I just leave that with council and Mayor Lennox. That's what we've been told, and we've been told nothing beyond that. So I will leave that.
Yeah, I would add, however, that if the conservation authorities are coming to us looking for more money, some of that will be as a result of what happened in 2020.
A direct result, I might suggest. And yeah, Mike.
Mayor Lennox, it sounds like you've got a very solid case to make with our friends at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So I look forward to supporting you with that.
Steve,
I was just going to say, Mike, to answer your question, I would not be a bit surprised if it's if that number for the conservation authorities is a bit light. We haven't had that big discussion yet, at least on the Soggy board yet, but don't be surprised.
Okay. So really today what we're doing is setting the direction with staff for what the next version of our budget looks like. Is at this point, is everybody satisfied with where we appear to be headed, or do we need to change direction completely? I guess now's the time to speak up.
I'm good, Mayor.
Fine with that.
Okay. Dan?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay.
So am I.
Okay, thank you. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple closing comments, Mayor Lennox. I did stop short. I did have 2 additional slides. One just kind of asking for council's wish list as it pertains to capital projects, and thank you, Mayor and council, for facilitating that. And also with regards to the service levels, were there any other things perhaps that we did not take into consideration? And based on conversation about the CAs, I think we've got our marching orders. So just a thank you to Mayor, yourself, and members of council for the direction.
Okay. Just anybody have anything on those final comments from Adams? Okay. Okay. I think we've beat this horse to death for tonight, so maybe it's time to move on. Thank you, Adam, for that and all of staff as well. I know that those budget numbers don't come out of thin air. A lot of work goes in behind the scenes. So again, thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay. Next on our agenda, we have the minutes from the previous meeting. So I have a recommendation here moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan, that the minutes of the public meeting and the regular meeting of council held on October 13th, 2020 be adopted as circulated. Any questions or comments on any of those minutes? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Business arising from previous meetings of council. We have a notice of motion from Councillor Yake regarding loose leaf pickup. Got the recommendation here. I'll read. I'm assuming you're going to move it, Dan, but we'll get a seconder for that. The recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North direct staff to conduct a loose leaf pickup in the urban areas of, meaning Arthur and Mount Forest of Wellington North, commencing November 9th, 2020. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Burke, thank you. Open the floor for discussion. Dan, I imagine you want to dive in?
Well, I guess, the recommendation speaks for itself. The one thing in the recommendation, I think I had said that we conduct one loose leaf pickup in the urban areas. I don't know if that makes it, the way it's written, makes it sound like it would be a continuous one. But anyway, I think a lot of people, from what I've seen in both Arthur and Mount Forest, have bought into the county program. I think we were a little late a lot late, coming to the table in getting the information to people of how the program was going to work. And there's many people, when you drive around both Arthur and Mount Forest, a lot of people have put out bags. There's some people with 2 and 3 bags. There's places that have probably 60 to 100 bags. So, and there's people that have just raked their leaves to the curb. Just left them on the road, and I guess they're gonna just see what happens. So I think as a municipality, we can't leave those. We need to clean them up. A lot of them are on catch basins, and I think we need to clean them up. We need to clean up our own curb and gutters. So I think that will be part of a loose leaf cleanup as well. And I think moving forward, we need to put more resources and more effort into promoting the county program. I mean, you know, I've bought into it. I bagged all my stuff. I put it to the curb. I'm trying to lead by example. I see Sherry's done the same thing. So, you know, we just need to put the resources, the time and effort into making sure this is how we go forward. But because we left it so late and communicated it poorly, I think we need to do a loose leaf pickup and move on.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to add to Councillor Yake's comments, the transition of this program should have been, we are accountable for some of that as well. Just because this was a service level change for our residents, the lateness of the communication, however, you know, I've also received a lot of really positive responses from the county's communication when it did come out, but it did leave some residents with few options that maybe aren't able to bag their leaves, etc. So I support doing a one-time loose leaf pickup, and then when the staff report comes out, let's review the program, see how it worked for us, the other 6-tier municipalities, and how effective it was. And maybe we need to communicate, you know, some suggestions on how the program could be improved, or leave it as status quo if it worked for everyone, and just continue to work on the communication piece, because I think it really did come out too late.
Okay. Anybody else? I would just weigh in a little bit myself in terms of, Dan, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, again, I think a lot of people have bought into the program. You couldn't even buy a brown paper bag in Mount Forest yesterday. There wasn't a store, and I mean, Home Hardware was closed, but there wasn't a place in Mount Forest where you could buy a bag. So obviously people have bought into the program, and I think they will continue to buy into it as long as we promote it and communicate it properly. So, but we're going to have to do something with the piles that are left on the side of the road, and they're in both Arthur and Mount Forest.
Okay. Yeah, and I was just going to add, my comment was really about there are some real benefits to bagging the leaves up for sure, and that then they'll blow around when you just rake them to the curb after a weekend event like we had this past weekend. Often they don't stay raked. At least if they're contained, they're not blowing onto the neighbor's property again. And the other piece that I have some, I don't know whether, I guess concern is the word about, is the timing around this. we're proposing at this point to do this one-off loose leaf pickup in between the two opportunities that the county is offering. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be smarter to do it after the county has completed their program, just to encourage people to continue to use the county program, because we believe that that's the right thing for the future, and two, so that we're not doing it twice. As you, I think, mentioned rightly so, Councillor Yake, you know, we do need to go and make sure that the catch basins are cleared off and so on, so that the streets drain appropriately. If we do it in the middle of November and then we wait till the end of the county pickup program, which I think is 23rd of November that week, then are we going to be doing it again after anyway? So that's just one of my questions and concerns. Sherry?
So I'm not really stuck on the date that's in the recommendation. I just think that it's important that at some point we go around and pick up the loose leaves that are left. Whether it's after the last pickup, which I also think is late. And I think that maybe as part of our report or recommendations, if we can have some input for the 2021 program, November the 23rd is pretty late. We know lots of times, unfortunately, we might see the white stuff, and that's going to impact on how those leaves and that waste can be picked up. So I'm not really stuck on the date as much as we go around and pick up the leaves that are left.
Okay. Matt?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, I see Councillor McCabe has something to say.
Okay, I'm sorry, I must have missed that. Steve?
Thanks, Matt. I was just going to say, and I know this is hard. I would think it would be a hard date to nail down, Councillor Burke. What day were you thinking of? If the 23rd, because yeah, you're right, the 23rd might be too late and it might be frozen, and you know, we got to clean that up, I suppose, before then. But I'd hate to do it in between the county pickup, and then there would still be stuff left over after their very final date of pickup. Because then what are we going to do? Do it again?
Well, I'm not suggesting, I don't have a strong sense either way. I just think that at some point, and it would give a truer sense of how this program is or isn't working in some neighborhoods if we do it after the last pickup. What I'm suggesting is if we have an opportunity to have those discussions in 2021, that the November pickup for leaves is sooner. Because we could have snow, so that's going to impact how those leaves get picked up. I'm not tied to the date that's in the recommendation. I don't know what that date is. I guess I sort of look towards staff and, you know, what works for their schedule.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at the cat. Sorry.
Nope.
Yeah, I think this is a moving target, I would say, and this is the inaugural year for the county pickup, so they might move dates next year as well for 2021. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, yep. Through you, Mayor Lennox. A comment I would make, and it's kind of in line with the transition that we went through with solid waste this year in July, was that the county fully expected that there's a bit of a learning curve related to new programs. And in starting to prepare for the report, because staff will bring a report, I have reached out to all of the municipalities in Wellington County, and basically from a road patrol standpoint, they clear catch basins, but none of them offer the loose leaf pickup is what I would offer to the conversation. But there will be a report coming too, consistent with the ask at last meeting.
Any other comments, questions?
What's going on?
So we do have a recommendation that we're dealing with here. If nobody has anything further, then I'm just going to have to call the vote. Did you have anything at all, Lisa? I haven't heard from you.
Nothing really, except I think it is premature prior to that November 23rd date, even though it is late, you know.
Okay. So I think what we have November 9th, but really we're talking about a week-long type. This isn't going to happen all in one day, and weather could have an impact on it as well. So I think the proposal at this point is commencing on the 9th, but clearly it's not all going to happen in one day. Yeah, I struggle to support the proposal at this point, just because I think it's too soon in terms of the utilizing the county resources. But I'm not opposed to us tidying things up after the fact. I mean, this is what we've done in the past. It's what people have become used to, and it is maybe what we need to do to transition to the new program. Any other comments before I call the question? Steve?
I would agree with you. I'm not a fan of this, and I hope this doesn't go on for next year either. Like, if we do this, it'll just be, as you suggested, Mayor, just maybe a tidy up of the catch basins and gutters. Because, yeah, as Matt asked and said, no other municipality even offers this to begin with. And I know, yes, we're lucky that our residents have had that service for a while. But yeah, if we do this, it's only a one-time shot, and it's just to clean up afterwards.
Okay. Lisa?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it makes more sense to do just a quick cleaning up. Doing a second, I guess, full-fledged leaf pickup, I think is just muddying the waters. Either we're in, we're out, but it does make sense to clean up our municipality. I don't want stuff all over the place, clearly. So after the second pickup.
Okay. Dan?
Well, obviously the dates are wrong. I mean, they'll never get anything picked up at the end of November. Is there anybody in this meeting that thinks that'll happen? Come on. And somebody's wrong about the fact that other municipalities don't do loose leaf cleanups. The city of Kitchener does it. The city of Cambridge does it. There are ones that do it. We got information on municipalities that don't do it. So, we've made a mountain out of a molehill in regards to this issue. Gone on in Arthur and Mount Forest for years. And now we've gone about this and made a complete mess of it.
Okay. Lisa?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. I don't think it's fair to really compare us to an urban municipality, but quite frankly, I get more complaints, how to put this, from people in the rural area that are upset that they pay for this, and they are a third of our residents. So it doesn't sit with me well that we're necessarily providing not an equal service across our municipality.
Nothing sits well with you, Lisa. It's always urban versus rural, every issue.
Equalizing it across the municipality is not urban versus rural.
It'll never happen.
Okay. I don't think we're going to gain anything from that. Matt, I saw you were there and then you disappeared. Did you have anything further you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify. I've only reached out to Wellington County at this point. I think Mike has reached out to a couple municipalities outside, but staff will reach out to additional municipalities. But my comment was only that I've reached only out to Wellington County municipalities.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Karen.
I'd just like to speak to the customer service aspect of it. We in our office are handling a lot of calls. We refer, if we have to the county, but we have been reiterating this information up until 4:30 today. So I don't know that we've done something wrong. I just want to support staff in that. We have been very supportive of the county and pushing out their messages and tweeting and social media and Facebooking. We just have only been able to reiterate what the program was. So the calls will come in tomorrow now that I just bagged up 100 bags of leaves and now my neighbor doesn't have to. So and we'll handle those calls. It's such mixed messaging. That's the problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Karen. Anybody have anything further? If not, I would like to support, us doing a cleanup. I can't support the date. So with that in mind, it's a little unorthodox perhaps, but I would move that we amend the date in the resolution to after the county pickup. And I would ask if there's anybody that would be interested in seconding that. Lisa? Any discussion, further discussion on changing the dates?
I'm good.
Sherry?
So if we're going to change the date, because part of the problem with the new program is the communication piece. So if we're changing the date, are we going to pick up loose leaves in front of Joe's place, or are we just looking at doing the gutters and the catch basements? And if we're doing both, then we need to have some kind of date that it commences starting that pickup program. Otherwise, we haven't evolved. We're still circling around, not communicating to the residents properly.
Okay, I'm not sure where to go with that, Sherry. The county program has been communicated, the dates. We haven't communicated that we're doing anything yet because we haven't decided to do anything yet.
And that has been my message, that this is right now, tonight, this is just a notice of motion with a recommendation that the county program, until there's a decision made this evening, is status quo. But if we're going to do a pickup, we need to determine what we're picking up. Is it just catch basements so that it doesn't ruin our infrastructure, the leaves don't get down there and ruin our infrastructure? Or are we picking up the leaves in front of Joe and Bob and Mary's place?
Okay. And my understanding, and was that it was the same context as was being proposed, that we would be doing a loose leaf pickup, just changing the date to be tidying up those that didn't understand or weren't able to comply with the county program and clearing our catch basins. So both is my understanding. If anybody has a different understanding, I'd be happy to hear that. Okay. Any other discussion on the changing the date till after the county program is complete? If there's no more discussion on that, then I'll vote on the amendment and then come back to the original. Okay, so we're going to vote now. Sorry, go ahead, Sherry.
So there isn't going to be a date tied to the amendment. It's just going to be after the 23rd of November. I'm just asking for clarification.
Yes. Karen, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, what you said was move to amend the pickup date to after the county pickup. Theirs is going to start in November, but it's not going to be done in the one day. They're probably going to be a week, so we don't want to say after the 23rd. We want to keep it when the county is done.
Okay. Matt, I see your camera, and then it disappeared.
Yep. Through you, Mayor Lanx, I was just going to say, yeah, I think we don't know how long the county program takes, but I would suggest the county program might take a week. So I agree with what Karen's saying as it relates to, but after the county program, I think staff can figure that out.
Okay. Any more discussion on changing that date? Okay, all those in favor of amending this to after the county program pickup, planned county program pickup? Opposed? Okay, Dan, did you want to vote on this? Dan?
I think he might be froze.
Okay. So we did have 3 in favor of the amending the date anyways, so the amendment is carried. So we're back to the original motion as amended now. So did we lose Dan?
I believe so. I don't show him on the call. He froze. He might be trying to call back in.
Well, as the mover of the original motion, we probably better try to wait for him to see if he can connect again.
Okay.
So we'll just hang on for a minute or two. If he can't rejoin us,
I'm going to send him an email. Darren's just emailed, said he's dropped a few times tonight. Takes a couple minutes to auto reconnect.
okay. Because he's the mover, Karen, if he's not able to reconnect, how do we deal with that?
You could ask for someone else to move it on his behalf. I mean, I know you've already moved and seconded it and it's on the floor.
Okay.
I think the more important thing, we will show he was at the meeting when he moved it, right? He lost connectivity at 9:23. I think the more important thing is to have a quorum and majority vote.
Okay.
Okay, Dan just
It is his.
emailed, said he can't connect.
Okay.
He's just sent an email saying he can't connect.
The other thing we could do is defer till later in the meeting as well, probably. Hoping he could reconnect. Would that be correct, Karen?
Yes, we can do that. We can set it aside. We'll just show that Councillor Yake lost connectivity at 9:23 with a motion on the floor, and we're just postponing the vote.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that? We'll just put off the vote portion. Hopefully Dan is able to reconnect and we can include him. I just don't feel right when it's his notice of motion to
that's
move
fair.
move on without him. Okay. With that being said, our next item on the agenda is items for consideration. So I guess this is our opportunity to pull out some for further discussion. Anybody have any they'd like to pull out? Please speak up.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind 5B, sorry, 5B and 7A.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Lisa?
2B, please.
2B, that's the Lucas subdivision one? Is that the one?
Sorry, 1B.
Arthur BIA?
Yes.
Okay. Sherry?
Just 5A, just because we have had some this previous discussion and concerns by residents, so I think it's important just to highlight that report.
Okay.
Matt, do you need 5C pulled in the report on the Township of Wellington North OREG water system financial plan? No? Okay.
No, I think based on what's been decided, that resolution can stand, and that, no, I don't. Thanks though, Karen.
Thank
And
you.
I guess I just had a quick conversation with Councillor Yake, and he's trying to connect, so.
Okay.
I do think the recommendation in that on the agenda, it needs to be amended to say we receive the wastewater, we have to adopt it. What the same wording that we used. We have to adopt the water financial plan. You can receive the water and wastewater rates. The word adopt needs to be in there.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you're right, Karen. The second clause instead of approve should say adopt.
Okay. So we're going to pull that one in just to make that change, if for nothing else.
I think Dan is out for the evening.
Okay. Okay, I would also request 3A. The Community Support Fund application. Any others? So I'll just recap. We've got 1B, 3A, 5A, B, and C, and 7A. Any others? Okay. All right, so then we'll adopt all of the others that are not being pulled out. So I have a recommendation here, moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry, that all items listed under items for consideration on the October 26, 2020 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll go back and start with 1B. And so we've got the Arthur BIA Association meeting, and the recommendation moved by Lisa, seconded by Sherry, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the minutes of the Arthur Business Improvement Association meeting held on October 7th, 2020. Open the floor for discussion. Lisa.
I just pulled it basically because I normally give you guys a report, and I couldn't because I wasn't at the last meeting when I was sick. Just wanted to highlight basically maybe a couple of things. The annual general meeting has now gone to a Zoom format, and that will be November 18th at 7:30. Basically, and the other kind of general items, of course, you've read, but we've gone through some of the proposed enhancements and had an in-depth discussion around that, and a fairly comprehensive look at the possible levy going forward. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that AGM that will be virtual on November the 18th.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So that moves us on to 3A. So a motion here, a recommendation here, moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report EDO 2020-27, being reported on an application to the Emergency Community Support Fund. And further, the council supports partnering with the Mount Forest Lions Club as lead agency on the application. Open the floor for any discussion. I guess since I pulled it, I'll go first. I just wanted to have a shout out to the Mount Forest Lions Club and thank them for stepping forward to do this and partner so that the community pantry can benefit from this. This is absolutely critical in helping people who are most vulnerable in our community, and I'm thrilled that the Mount Forest Lions were willing to step up and do that. So just wanted to mention that. Any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. That brings us to 5A. And this one I'm going to say is moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. That the recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive for information report Ops 2020-028 being on London Road North. And we'll open the floor for discussion on that one. Sherry, go ahead.
Well, I was the one that pulled this. I just wanted to have maybe Matt highlight the report, but I just felt that it was important to have this report pulled as it was generated by a notice of motion of council by concerns raised from an area resident out there. So if Matt, you could just sort of highlight the report, and I also have a question for you as well. And that is with the road being left as gravel at this time, will we continue to suppress and maintain dust control at the same levels of 2020 or higher? Because I think your report says that we put on 2 calcium applications to help suppress the dust. So will we maintain it at that level or greater, just to help address some of those concerns?
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Yep. Through you, Mayor Lennox. Yeah, dust suppression in 2020 was 2 applications, and there was really only a couple roads in the township where we put 2 applications, because typically our level of service is 1 application. I think we arrived at that conclusion this year just as it relates to complaints, and some of it has to do with the weather that we saw this season. I wouldn't really want to commit to, typically putting on 2 applications on that stretch of road, but I think we're sensitive to the fact that dust is an issue, but dust is an issue on all gravel roads. Yeah, which kind of maybe is a non-answer, Councillor Burke, and I apologize for that, but I think traditionally we've only put 1 application on London Road, and I don't know enough if it was a function of the weather that we saw this year, or just the conditions that we saw, but I think typically for gravel roads in the township, the level of service is 1 application, so I wouldn't want to commit to putting on 2 on that stretch, probably without talking to my roads department a little more.
Go ahead, Sherry.
So I'm okay with that. I think that as long as it's on the radar and, whatever is deemed necessary to make that road slightly better. It's not quite the same as a rural road. It is in the urban boundary. So as long as it's on staff's radar to maintain that, so that the dust is not as great.
Okay. Any other questions or comments in regard to that report? Mike?
Just to go a little further on that piece, council has the authority to bring London Road as part of the budget conversation. If this needs to be addressed, one of the sections, that's a council decision. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that this isn't, it's not off the table in that instance. The budget hasn't passed. Council still has that authority to suggest that they want to see either one section or both sections to be considered as part of the budget process. So I didn't want that to get missed.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I just have a question for clarification, if I can, Matt, and that is around that. I think you've identified it as section 1, which I believe is from the Birmingham to Durham. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
And I was, if I read the report right, I was a little surprised in that you've identified that the under road services are already in place in that section, which was a surprise to me. I thought that there would need to be sanitary go into that section of road to serve, certainly to serve the east side, but I thought there was need for that to serve the west side as well. Go ahead.
Yep, through you, Mayor Lennox, I guess I wasn't thinking about the east side of the road as far as sanitary servicing, so I think that's a big unknown as it relates to the east side of the road. Jack's Way, which is a development that's planned on the west side of the road, is going to be serviced down the Birmingham Street right away, but certainly there is water main and storm on London, so yeah, I mean, probably the east side of London Road could be serviced down Birmingham, which, to be fair, would be a pretty minor, cut through the road. But yeah, I was not thinking of servicing the farmland on the east side of London Road when I made that statement in the report. So, but that section, I think from a staff standpoint, we don't see that section of road requiring underground work for the next 10 years, but.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wasn't clear about that because there is obviously proposed development there between the Durham Street and Birmingham Street road allowances, and I wasn't clear that all the necessary services were in there. But I'm assuming that also is it, and I think you've stated it in the report that doesn't anticipate upgrading to an urban standard on that section either.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. The 18,000 does not. It continues the rural standard that is north of Wellington right now, which is just sort of like a 7-meter, 2 inches of asphalt and then shouldering.
Okay. And then the section from Durham to Sligo, which I think you've identified as section 2, if there were to be development on either side of London, it would require sanitary servicing down the road, correct? Mm-hmm. And water as well?
Correct. Yep. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So if we want to bring this issue forward in budget, then we have to consider what we think the longer medium term will be for that before we want to waste money on pavement if we think it's going to be ripped up again. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, from my standpoint, it's very similar to Preston Street North in 2015 or 2016, which ultimately will get cut into to cut services in. But the section 1 from the Birmingham right away to Durham, I think staff feel there's very limited chance that gets cut into.
Okay. Now the report also anticipates perhaps contribution from the development that is to occur between Birmingham and Durham Street. We haven't had those conversations yet with that developer in this case.
That's still forthcoming, but okay. It's not. It could happen in 2021. I think it's reasonable that we might enter a development agreement or a subdivision agreement in 2021 with that developer, or even probably 2021. I would suggest at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so yeah, we're just receiving the report tonight. So, and then as to Mike's point, if we want to give further direction to staff, then now would be an appropriate time as well. So if there's nothing further, I'll call the motion then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And that gets us to 5B. This is Report Ops 2020-29, being a report on the traffic count. And kind of lost track of where I was, but I'm going to say that's moved by Lisa, seconded by Sherry. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive for information report Ops 2020-29, being a report on traffic counts. And open the floor for discussion. Steve. You're muted, Steve.
Sorry, did it again, I know. I just wanted to say how I think intense this program was to do the traffic count all around the township. It took in small roads, big roads, and our, as you can see, the most busiest roads as well. I guess my only question is for you, Matt, can we use this if we were to ever open up a conversation with the MTO for street lights north of Sligo? Like, would they find any used for this, or would they just
You're
dismiss
meaning
it?
traffic control lights, Steve?
Yes, sorry, yes, streetlights, yes. Or not streetlights, yeah, traffic control.
Matt?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, and I have never been through the process, Councillor McCabe, but I think any of that kind of information bodes well. It doesn't hurt the conversation. And I think township staff's intention is to do, a similar number of counts every year, because really, I think it's a very important input into a roads program. So I think it's very helpful in the conversation with the MTO. We have some specific traffic impact study reports on the north end of Mount Forest, which again, this would help inform or help support or help better understand.
Did you have more, Steve?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Matt. What was I just going to say? I just lost my train of thought just when you were talking about the MTO again. I'll think of it again. No, I just wanted to make sure that was going to be used in any conversation that we have going forward. I know the MTO, when they last did a traffic count, and I think it was maybe on a Tuesday, and I don't think it boded very well for our conversations about putting a traffic control light in north of Sligo. So hopefully we can use this, and hopefully it helps.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? I guess I would add my voice to Steve's, and that this is good information. It's good to have objective information when we're faced with making priority choices between where we spend our dollars on roads. Where the ones where people are using them is where we ought to be spending our dollars, I think. And so I think this is a great information piece to help us look objectively at where we are spending our roads enhancement dollars. So I thank staff for doing that. I have to admit, though, that the disparity, I obviously knew some roads were used more than others, but the disparity between some was kind of surprising to me. So it's good to see, and it does put some context around our road network that otherwise isn't available. So any other comments or questions? Okay, then I'll call the motion. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And now we're on to item C. Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. And I'm going to read this all out because we do need to change it a little bit. So this is in regard to the water system financial plan. So the recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report Ops 2020-31, being a report on the Township of Wellington North OREG 453/07 water system financial plan number 113-301A for 2021 to 2026, and wastewater system financial plan. And further, the council adopt the OREG 453/07 water system financial plan 113-301A 2021 to 2026, and wastewater financial plan prepared by DFA Infrastructure International Inc. dated October 26, 2020. And further, that council directs staff to post a copy of the OREG 453/07 water system financial plan number 113-301A 2021 to 2026, and wastewater system financial plan dated October 26, 2020 on the township website. And further, the council directs staff to submit a copy of the OREG 453/07 water system financial plan number 113-301A and wastewater system financial plan dated October 26, 2020 to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And further, that the resolution of council approving the OREG 453/07 water system financial plan number 113-301A and wastewater system financial plan dated October 26, 2020 be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks on or before November 18th, 2020, as required as a part of the municipal drinking water license renewal application. Okay, I think I need a drink of water. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? Okay, all those in favor then? That's carried. Thank you. And that brings us to 7A. And I'm going to say this is moved by Lisa, seconded by Sherry, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North received the correspondence dated October 8th, 2020 from the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 134, Mount Forest, Ontario. Request for permission to distribute copies and proclaim November 11th as Remembrance Day. And further, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North declare November 11th, 2020 as Remembrance Day and grant permission to the Royal Canadian Legions, Arthur and Mount Forest, for the distribution of poppies within the Township of Wellington North. Open the floor for discussion. Steve.
I just wanted to bring this to light. That's all. I wanted to give this the shout out that it needed. And this time of COVID-19, it's going to be a reduced crowd at the cenotaphs, unfortunately. And I think it said it was the first time in quite some time or ever that the Legions have told people to stay away from the cenotaph. And I just wanted to bring this more to light so that people go out and still support through the poppy program, even though they might not be most welcome at the cenotaphs.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Anybody else want to comment on this? I would further add too that while the parades have been canceled and they're asking for less numbers of people at the cenotaph, this still continues to be an important ceremony in our community, and I think the Legions may be working on live streaming or trying to connect this ceremony with other people who may be able to stay at home as well. So it's great to see under these difficult circumstances we're finding a way to continue to honor our veterans and remember the sacrifice that they've made on our behalf. So. Any other comments, questions? Okay, call the motion then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So I guess we better go, we still don't have Dan joining us, Karen? So I guess we better go back and finish up. And you think we don't need a new mover because he was present during the time?
Yes.
Okay. So just let me, so we're going to go back to that notice of motion directing staff to conduct a loose leaf pickup in the urban areas of Arthur and Mount Forest of Wellington North, commencing after the county pickup in November, starting November 23rd. So we've already changed the date. We're just adopting this motion as amended or not. Mike?
Just wanted to clarify, when the conversation first started, Mayor Lennox, you had made mention when the motion reads urban areas, that we clarified that was Mount Forest and Arthur. I just want to make sure that's recognized. That was the intent, I think, during the first conversation, but I just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that piece, which I think everybody is.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So any final comments or questions before I call the vote? Okay, all those in favor of this as amended? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right, so let's deal with that. Next on our list is a notice of motion this evening. Does anyone have a notice of motion?
I do not.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to community group meeting program report. Does anybody have anything they'd like to report on this evening? Lisa?
First off, I just wanted to thank Councillor Steve for covering for me for both the chamber meetings when I was stuck in the hospital, so I couldn't even Zoom in. But I did attend a cultural roundtable meeting last week, and I can report on that. So we did have that in person, but completely physically distant and under the number and everything else. We do have one member of the committee that is not available by internet, so it was nice for him. We are going to hold our next meeting by Zoom, and we'll try to accommodate him somehow. But I just wanted to bring up that Jim is going to be looking, I believe, to make a presentation to council, kind of updating on the cultural roundtable and etc. I think he did that before and it was well received, so he's looking to have another conversation. And we're looking at refreshing the cultural roundtable a little bit, maybe changing up some of the members and then looking at its mandate going forward. And big thank you to Bonnie, who has completed that Find a Grave project. COVID-19 has been wonderful for her in that respect, is that she's been isolating up in the cemetery. Are you very happy with her progress, Karen? Like, I can't believe that she did all that. So everything that she could complete was done.
It was great. Her and another woman really did the bulk of it. So it was really good. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, she carried a little kit and everything to clean the graves markers off and had special ways of photographing things. She's just amazing. And I did also want to say, I just got a photo emailed to me about the Lions in Arthur accepting a large $2,000 check from Whiteman today. So big thank you to Whiteman and partnering with the Arthur Lions for that contribution to the BMX park. And that's it for my report.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Lisa. Anybody else have anything they'd like to report on this evening? Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I was more than happy to fill in at the chamber meetings, and thank God Dale was there as well. He quarterbacked a lot of it as I went in as a pinch hitter in the last minute. So no, it was a good meeting, and I think we got a lot of good positive conversation with regard to wayfinding signs that are going to be in Mount Forest and in Arthur. So that worked out really well. And the last thing I would say is November 3rd next week is the Rec and Culture Committee meeting at 8:30.
Okay. Thank you. Any others? Sherry? Okay. Just a quick update with regard to Wellington North Power. You may recall that during the height of the pandemic, Wellington North Power had a planned rate increase that was due to happen, I believe, May 1st, that was deferred. So it was not passed along on May 1st, but it actually will be implemented starting, I believe, November 1st. So if you hear about that was deferred earlier, but is coming back. And Wellington North Power is right in the process of submitting a new rate application for the coming 5-year period. So we'll be waiting to see what the Ontario Energy Board has to say about that. We're looking forward to the next chapter. So I don't think I have anything else in particular to report this evening. So if there's no other ones, we'll move on from that to bylaws. Okay, so we have a recommendation here to deal with I think we're dealing with all of them at once. So moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve, that bylaw number 89-20, 90-20, 91-20 be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Any questions or comments on any of those bylaws? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And that gets us to our confirming bylaw. Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa, that bylaw number 92-20 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its regular meeting held on October 26, 2020, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And moved by Lisa, seconded by Sherry, that the regular council meeting of October 26, 2020 be adjourned at 10 p.m. All those in favor? That's carried. We're officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your participation this evening. A lot of stuff on the agenda. Hope you have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good week.
Yes, bye, everyone.